but I have a lot to cover today. And really what we're going to focus in on, which Linda really alluded to, was the power of your mindset. Now, one of the things that's kind of amazing about women is that we are so powerful when we're in a group. However, individually, we really tend to struggle with talking about money and negotiating money. In fact, there's one statistic out there for female breadwinners, which nowadays represents anywhere from 41% to 51% of American households have female breadwinners in them, depending what study you check into. That of that group, 40% downplay their earning status. So we'll look at why are we so uncomfortable with money, and then most important, what we can do about it. So let's get started with a quick quote, and this is going to kind of generationally set you right apart. So in the chat, if you know who this is, her character, not who she is, because her name's on the screen, feel free to put that in there. But I absolutely love this quote that Carrie Fisher, actor and actress, says, is everything is negotiable. Whether you're negotiating is easy is another thing. So this isn't a skill that we're born with. It isn't something that we're just naturally good at. It's something that we develop over time. And I think there's a myth that somehow, women are horrible at it and men are good at it. That actually is not true. And as we progress in time, what we find out is that women are actually really great negotiators once we acquire the skills and the practice. So let's look at why you may be avoiding negotiation. Now, if you've showed up today, you're either a leader and you are negotiating with an employee on behalf of your firm, or you are somebody that is maybe a leader and negotiating on your behalf. But before I share kind of my top 3 reasons why we're scared or uncomfortable with negotiation, why don't you, in the chat, let's just put 1 or 2 things that come to mind for you. What makes negotiation uncomfortable for you? And I'm just going to wait a second to see what pops up. I know for me, negotiation can sometimes be uncomfortable because there's that fear of being judged, or there's so much in our heads around what women are and aren't supposed to do. So Charlotte says the fear of the outcome, thinking I'm asking too much. Christy, rejection, that's a big one. Those are all the things that we worry about. And those are probably, the top 3, but keep those rolling in, because I want to tell you that in my understanding and study of women and their behavior around money, what I find is there's a couple of things that lead us to all those thoughts that we just shared. The fear of conflict, right? So was, that rejection, that conflict, that is a big one. We live with the myth that for some reason, a good negotiation is a battle. Well, it's a very male-dominated view of negotiation and not necessarily something that I encourage people to do. But I do appreciate that there's that fear of conflict, that fear of rejection. There is also something called your money story. Some of you may be familiar with the field of wealth psychology that I specialize in, others may not. A money story is a collection of all your thoughts and beliefs about money and its purpose in your life, and it's the story that we make up. It starts when we're age 5, believe it or not, and we become kind of conscious of money. And the thoughts are kind of really reinforced by the people in our lives. And usually a lot of our money story is written by the time we're 15 or 16. So this money story that often resides in our unconscious mind can dictate what we think about negotiating and how we feel when we're negotiating. So our money story is somewhat the key to unlock how you can become a more effective negotiator. Yes, there's skills that you need to develop, but there's also an understanding of your money story. And the great part about today is we're going to take some time to do an interactive exercise and do that. So you'll get an experience of what that's like if you haven't already. And lastly, there is this whole money talk taboo. The fact that in our society, almost half of Americans would rather talk about death, dying, or politics. In fact, I've written 5 books, and my last book, my favorite book, is called Breaking Money Silence. And it's really about this taboo against talking about money. And in a minute, I'll chat with you a little bit about how it impacts women in a different way than men and how that complicates the negotiation process. Or maybe it's better to say it complicates how we are thinking about negotiation. So negotiation often makes us feel like a little child within, like you get really scared, you get really small. And in the work that I do with the women that I work with, it's really about having them stand in their power, developing a script, developing a success mindset, and being able to stand in their adulthood. But if sometimes you feel like this little baby in front of you, I don't blame you. Some negotiations can feel like that. The goal is to learn and grow from every negotiation. So eventually you're bringing your adolescent to the negotiation, and then you're bringing your woman with her big girl boots. I often think of that song by Nancy Sinatra, which is an oldie but a goodie. These boots were made for walking. So how do you show up? How do you be confident? And how do you negotiate from a place of power? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to break your own money silence. Again, money silence is a concept that I started writing about in probably earlier than my book, but 2016-17. The book was published in 2017. And money silence is that money talk taboo that plagues our society. And it impacts men and women. And, no matter how you identify from a gender perspective, it impacts us. And we're going to talk a little bit about how it impacts you from a negotiation standpoint. What is important to know is that if you came from a family that didn't talk about money, if you lived in a culture that poo-pooed talking about money, which most of America does, and other cultures as well, that this is going to influence your comfort level in talking about money. And breaking money silence is the process of engaging in small conversations, daring to negotiate, daring to have these conversations in your life, and building up that muscle. Because when we're silent about something, we often make assumptions about other people, like, oh, he's a better negotiator, or she's a better negotiator, or they're better at this thing called money. Well, the fact of the matter is that nobody is perfect with money. And if we started talking about it more openly and honestly, then we would realize that it's just a skill we need to learn. And so that's part of what Purse Strings is doing. That's part of what Leadership Global is doing today. And so we're going to talk about why women need to break their money silence, why each and every one of you, and if you're a male ally on the call, you need to do it as well, and you need to support the women around you. There's a very high price that all of us, collectively, women, pay for our money silence. And this is one statistic that came out, I believe in 2018. It was by UBS. It was a study that was done on women and money, and it found that 61% of women would rather discuss their own death than money with a friend. So there's part of me that thinks that's crazy. And then there's part of me that really goes, no, I get it. I grew up in the exact same society. So why are women so reluctant to talk about money? We're reluctant to talk about money because for us, there are a lot of mixed messages about women and power and our financial power. And when you think about negotiation, what is that about? That's stepping into our financial power. So I'm not saying that we have to stay at 1%. I'm saying that it really highlights the problem and the fact that we pay a high price. Now, what's the price that we pay? I could throw 1,000 statistics at you, but I'm going to share a couple, one or two now. That if you do not negotiate your salary at the beginning of your career, over the course of your career, you could lose individually up to $1 million. And so each time you're negotiating, you have to think about, this is not only about this negotiation, it's also about acquiring wealth, generating wealth, and moving forward. So you want to think about it in those. The other thing is, I think, if we can role model better to the next generation of women on how to negotiate, we'll do a better job of reducing this number, and hopefully that women won't lose this $1 million anymore. One of the things that I posted, and I saw that Barb from Purse Strings posted, was the recent victory of the U.S. soccer team. I think it really speaks to the fact that if we are persistent, we can close that gender wage gap. And then the last one, which is really a hard one to swallow, is that $500 billion is what we lose collectively in 1 year in the United States due to the gender wage gap. And I want to just appreciate that this gender wage gap affects us differently. Right? So when we look at different races, we find that gender wage gap is very different. So for white women, it's 82 cents last time I checked. Black women, 63 cents to every man's dollar. Latino, 55 cents. And Asian women, 87 cents. The fact of the matter, it isn't one-to-one, and there's something wrong with it. Now, the gender wage gap is much, much more complicated than just you negotiating on your behalf or learning to effectively negotiate on behalf of your firm. But this is the part that is probably in everybody's control. Becoming a better negotiator is really going to help close that gap. We have some systematic changes we need to make as well, but this is a great place to start, or to really say, hey, I can make a difference. And you already know this, but negotiating skills are really vital for a variety of reasons. If you're a leader or a manager, again, you have to not only negotiate on your behalf, you also probably have some direct reports that you need to negotiate with. And what is really, really interesting to me is when I run my negotiation masterclass, and a lot of those folks are mid-level career, they're thinking about how do I negotiate on my own behalf, that they make assumptions that leaders and managers are just really good at negotiation. When if you talk to leaders and managers, some of you may be on the line, that isn't always the case. It can be uncomfortable on either side of the table. And so as you look, there are really good, vital reasons why you should be negotiating. And it's not just work. As parents, as partners, I mean, we're negotiating as women all the time. Take a minute to think about this morning, right? We're halfway through our day for most of us. How many, just thumbs up or something quick in the chat, how many of you have already engaged in a negotiation? How many? Now I'm going to scroll down because I'm not. Yep. Just a raise of hands or a quick, yep, almost every single one of us. And the negotiation may have been financial. But, for me, I think the negotiation this morning was with my husband of, are we going to eat the leftover chicken? Are we going to, what do you want? What do we want? Should we do takeout? It sounds simple, but those same skills that we use negotiating with each other, negotiating with our kids, is something that is transferable. And the next generation needs all of us who are attending today to role model these good behaviors. So negotiation skills are certainly for all of you. So we're going to get tactical and practical because I want you to walk away today with some new skills. Maybe if you've delved into your money mindset before, maybe some of this will be not necessarily repetitive, but reinforcing and take you to the next level. For others, it may be new tactics. Now, remember, my background is not only in wealth psychology, it's also in banking and finance. But really today, I'm going to draw on the wealth psychology part of my training to cover these 3 different tactics to really help you dig in. And so because we're virtual, the advantage of this is that you can really dig in and be very honest with yourself as we look at these 3 tactics. And then if you're comfortable, you can share in the chat or share at the end if we get to open it up to Q&A. So let me quickly go over each tactic, and then we're going to drill down into each one. The first step that I believe absolutely everybody needs to do in order to be an effective negotiator is explore your negotiation mindset. This is how you think and feel about negotiating. These are both conscious and unconscious thoughts, and they really call the shots unless you've figured out what those beliefs are. So we need to bring those to the conscious mind. And in a minute, we'll do an exercise that's going to allow you to start that process. Then once you have identified your negotiation mindset, it's really, really important to keep those positive thoughts that you have. Some of you may have great thoughts that support you in negotiating effectively. Others may have beliefs that maybe sabotage you or aren't healthy or problematic. And so I'm going to offer you a really simple structure to start to reframe and to shift your beliefs, because how we think affects how we feel, which affects our behavior, and it makes us more confident at the negotiation table and more skillful. And lastly, I'm going to introduce you, often people haven't heard of this technique, of the wise mind technique. Because one of the things that drives me absolutely batty is the idea that women are too emotional around money. When in fact, women's emotions around money, and dare I say, women's emotions around the negotiation process, as well as men, but we're focused on women today, are useful in the process. And so there's a technique called your wise mind that can help you honor the feelings that you're having about this at the same time as honoring the rational thoughts. So I think this is one of our superpowers, and I want to help you tap into it. Okay, so let's talk about your negotiation mindset. Now, when I'm working with somebody one-on-one or I'm working in my masterclass, I do kind of a deep dive into your negotiation. Today, we're just going to scratch the surface, but it's really going to help you kind of get a sense of what are some of the thoughts and beliefs that you have. And we all know that mindsets affect our behavior, our outlook, and that it's just a set of beliefs. And a negotiation mindset is actually a subset of your money story. So remember I said your money story is a story that formed between the ages of 5 and 15, influenced by the caregivers in your life, the society you live in, the culture you live in, and it impacts your behaviors. So let me give you an example. I was coaching a woman who had just, was an empty nester, had just sent her last kid off to college, and she was going back into the workforce. And she goes, I am so anxious about asking my boss for a raise. She had like a part-time job while the kids were in school, and she was going full-time, and she was really anxious about it. And so when we did this exercise, what she discovered was that part of her money story was that when she was 15, she was a babysitter. She babysat this family. They had 3 or 4 kids. And when she babysat them for a year, they were a lot of work. And she eventually said, I would like $1 raise. And the husband and wife said, okay, well, think about it. And then they never called her to babysit again. So that was in her conscious mind and was really affecting her ability. Now, it was many, many years ago, but it affected her ability. So our mindset is a powerful, powerful thing. It is affected or influenced by our own history, our own money event. This was one of the money events that influenced this particular client. But it's also influenced by our gender, the thoughts out there about how women aren't good negotiators. If we keep saying that, we're going to continue to not be as effective. Women are great negotiators. We just are catching up in terms of having practice and having the ability to do it. And we're also fighting against systematic issues. Culture and race is going to determine some of the beliefs that you have about negotiation. Your generation. I know that I was raised in a generation where you were just happy to have a job. And when I coach the millennials or Gen Zs, I'm now coaching Gen Zs, which is crazy. What I'm finding is at least they know I should be negotiating. I should be asking something that we didn't know when I was out there looking as a very, very old Gen Xer. So I'm sure some of my boomers and Gen Xers can identify. Believe it or not, our spirituality impacts our mindset negotiation. There are different beliefs and different religions about whether you should be profit motivated. I'll speak to my own religion. I am somebody that was raised Catholic. And while I no longer practice Catholicism, the beliefs in my head about the nobility of poverty and that it's better to take less and do good work than be financially successful is something that I had to overcome in order to be financially successful. Now, I'm not saying religion is bad. I'm just saying that it does affect how we think about money and wealth. And then there's also social economic status. Social economic status. If we were raised in a working class or lower class neighborhood versus if we were raised with affluence, it's going to affect how we think about the numbers we're negotiating, how we think about acquiring wealth. And so it's just really important to be aware of all of these factors. If any of you on the line are interested in drilling down into these influencers and want to do a little bit more work there, just put that in the chat and maybe Linda or someone on the call can keep track of that. And I can make sure that you get that handout. Okay, so now we're at the point where I need your participation. I'm going to have you explore your negotiation mindset. So my hope is that you are in a place where it is safe to either write or put something down in your tablet, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to read off a series of 5 statements. And at the end of each statement, I'm going to want you to write down what comes into your mind automatically. That's the key. It's not what's politically correct. It's not what's okay to say. It's not what you think the right answer is. It's what comes up automatically. Because again, we are trying to tap into your automatic thoughts and beliefs about negotiating. The other thing that I want to say is that if you are someone on the call and you came to this call because you're like, oh, I'd like to learn to negotiate better on my own behalf because I need to really work on my negotiation skills, answer or complete the statements based on that perspective. If you're sitting there thinking, you know what, I'm a leader, I'm pretty good at negotiation, but when I'm negotiating with somebody else, maybe a new hire or one of my staff members, it's hard for me, then answer from that perspective. Do whatever is most useful for you. Okay. And if you're driving in a car, do not write this down. I want you to be safe. You can answer it in your head. Okay, here we go. And it's going to go pretty quick. So whatever pops into your mind, asking for money for myself is. So you're negotiating and you're asking money for yourself. How is that experience? Asking for money on another's behalf. So this could be asking for money on behalf of your firm, asking for money on behalf of a charity. It's just not asking for yourself. Growing up, I learned that negotiation was. Be really honest with yourself. The biggest fear I have when I'm negotiating is. And this, remember, we tell ourselves stories. Sometimes it helps us, sometimes it gets in the way. But the story I tell myself about me as a negotiator is, what's the story you're telling yourself before the meeting, during the meeting, after the meeting? Okay, so we went through that quickly because I want you to get what is that automatic thought. And again, if you want to drill down more deeply, let me know. I can get you a more extended version of this. But basically, now we're going to switch gears. Look down the list of the automatic thoughts and beliefs that came up for you. This may be information that you know, you've just written it down for the first time. It may be that some of it you knew, but some of it was a little surprising. And I want you to think about, how does your negotiation mindset in this very moment, because it can change depending on the day, depending on the time, depending on the work that you do around this, how is that mindset impacting your negotiation conversations? If we were live and we were doing a workshop, we'd have a big share right about now. So I'm going to give you an option. You don't have to share your actual mindset unless you want to, but I would like to know one positive that your negotiation mindset impacted you in a positive way by, and your negotiation mind impacted you in a negative by, because usually it's a mixed bag. We're not all good or bad. We're complex people and we have a complex mindset. So if you start to identify, what are my strengths? What are the messages that I'm sending myself that are positive? Write them down. Keep saying them. Train your brain to think those thoughts and beliefs because those are positive. We want to reinforce those. In terms of the sabotaging beliefs or the problematic beliefs, I don't like to call them negative because they're just beliefs, they're just thoughts, but they can get in the way. And so when they get in the way of your negotiation, you need to think about, how do I reframe them? Now, because my background is not only in banking and finance, it's in counseling, I used to do a lot of cognitive therapy. So we're not doing therapy today, but I'm using this model from cognitive therapy. It's a very simple one, but it really helps us understand that if we want to shift our thoughts, we need that ultimately, if we shift our thoughts, it's going to shift how we're feeling and our behaviors. And I've seen this in action for years. I've seen this in action with my clients. I certainly have seen this in myself. And so if you look at this example, if your thought is, I hate negotiating, I'm going to be rejected, then your emotions are what? Like, I don't know what emotion that is, but you might feel anxious or just like you're dreading that conversation. And what's your behavior? You probably go into the meeting with a body language that isn't as positive. You'll play small. You'll take what you can get. Now, if you walked into that meeting and you thought, you know what? I'm going to use Barb's, I deserve my value. Your emotions, you're going to sit up. Behavior is going to be more open, more confident. You might even be excited to have the conversation, maybe still nervous, but a little bit of excitement or a little bit of empowerment in there. And you're going to come across, especially if you practice the skills up front and the conversation, more confident, and the outcome is going to be better. So it is really important for us as women to look at what are the messages we're feeding ourselves? What's our money story around negotiation? And how do we shift those thoughts that are no longer serving us? We can go back to them after the negotiation if you really want to hang on to them. But in general, we have these thoughts that need to be reframed. So what you do is you take the thought and you say to yourself, what's the evidence that this thought is true? Because one of the things that we do as human beings, that is a big mistake, we all do it, is we believe if we have a thought that it's true. Well, it isn't always true. Sometimes it's not factual, sometimes it's purely emotional, and sometimes it's just a fact. But you really have to weigh the evidence. How true is this statement? And then if it is not accurate, if it's not just a basic fact, then you need to reframe it. You need to figure out a new way, like a new money mantra, a new money message. And so let me give you an example. I have a client who says, I'm a lousy negotiator. Okay, you're a lousy negotiator. If you say to yourself before you walk into a negotiation, I'm a lousy negotiator, oh my God, I'm a lousy negotiator, what's going to happen? You're not going to probably have a very effective negotiation. You're not going to be quite successful. However, what's the evidence that this client, this person is a lousy negotiator? And this is the part you have to think really long and hard about. And if you have trouble with this part, you ask a mentor, you ask a coach, you ask a friend, a partner. But when talking with this person, we found out she negotiated one time and got rejected. Does one time make a lousy negotiator? Nope. One time just makes, I had this experience, it wasn't positive. It does not make someone a good, bad, or lousy negotiator. So this isn't a factual statement. It's more emotional, and it's based on only one experience. And so the reframe also can be hard, but you have to write these down. You have to keep repeating them. Is I'm an inexperienced negotiator. Now that's a fact. This person's only negotiated one time. But with practice, I will become more effective. Do you notice how like even when I say it, like I lift up a little bit? So if you find yourself saying a statement like, I'm a lousy negotiator, each time you say that, you have to say stop and read, and eventually it will get trained in your brain that I'm an inexperienced negotiator, but I'm working on it. And so this process takes time, it takes energy, but the more we repeat the reframes, the positive money mantras, the better our brain is at seeing evidence to support that, oh, wait a second, I'm just inexperienced, I'm getting better. And it leads us to have a more positive outcome. So think about the negotiation mindset exercise you just did. Think about one of those thoughts that you had that was not useful. And then I challenge you, either now or after this workshop is over, to then measure the evidence and work on a reframe. This is the process that's going to help you get to a mindset that isn't perfect. It isn't 100% success, yay me, because that isn't being human, but it is a place and a strategy to use to retrain your brain. And at the same time, and we're not covering this today, but at the same time, you then need to develop skills in negotiation. But if you don't have the right mindset, you can have 1,000 skills that often won't go the right way because you don't have the belief in yourself. So mastery takes practice. We all know this intellectually, but you know what? It's hard, especially if you're a leader, you worked hard in your career. You know, it's hard when you become a novice, or it's hard when you're not great at something. But this picture is a picture of me actually after doing a header, which means head first in the snow, to prove that you have to practice in order to get better. So anybody who knows me and knows my work, and a lot of you are new to me, but you'll know that I a lot about skiing. I'm an alpine skier. In fact, I'm really bummed out. It's so warm here today in Vermont because all the snow is melting, and I just live for the next powder day, which is hopefully Friday. So I'm really good at alpine skiing. But because of the pandemic, I decided to take up backcountry skiing. And backcountry skiing, you use different equipment. And it's similar to cross country. It's hard to explain, but if you haven't skied, but basically the big difference is when you're downhill skiing, your boot, like your ski is here and your boot is locked in, both your toe and your heel. If you are backcountry skiing, your ski is here, your toe is locked in. So you go in like this. That's a very different motion. So I decided after a couple of weeks of backcountry skiing with my friends that I saw a little hill, and I can go down really big hills with bumps and everything, alpine skiing. And I thought, I'm ready. I can do it. As you can see from this picture, which my lovely husband took before he actually picked me up out of the snow, I didn't do very well going over that hill. But in that moment, I had a choice, right? So my choice was I could get really mad at myself, which in my 20s, I certainly would have done. But I could have got really mad at myself that I did this header and what an idiot I am. And oh my God, I'm lousy at this backcountry skiing. Or I could have sat there. I could have laughed it off with my friends. And then I could have later thought, what could I have done differently? And I realized my balance was off because my heel was not locked in. I just needed to recalibrate my balance. And so eventually I was able to get over that hill. But we each have a choice. When we're doing this work around our negotiation mindset, we have a choice. Can we beat ourselves up, or can we learn from each time we get out there and try? And I try very, very hard to learn from each time we get out there, because there's always a nugget of information, even in a successful negotiation, that can help you with the next one. So remember to be compassionate with yourself, and that mastery takes time. So we have talked about your negotiation mindset. We have talked about how to reframe any sabotaging thoughts that you have, and that's going to take some work, but you have at least a strategy to do that. And we're going to end with this third strategy, which is called using your wise mind. Now, I don't know if you, and you can put it in chat if you have, wise mind is, has anybody heard of wise mind or wise mind technique? It's used in the field of psychology sometimes, but it also comes from Buddhist principles. And so basically, I'll tell you what the theory is, and then we'll apply it to negotiation. Okay, so we all know, and we talk a lot about, even though this is a very overly simplistic Venn diagram, that we have a rational part of our mind and we have an emotional part of our mind. And so we're rational beings and we're emotional beings. And as I said at the beginning, I'm very tired of hearing how women are too emotional. I actually think when I'm teaching communication skills, when I'm teaching, I teach a lot of financial advisors about money psychology. Many of the men need to tap into the emotional side. Often, and this is a generalization, so you may be different and that's fine, but often women can access that pretty quickly. So instead of saying, I should be more rational about this, or I'm overly emotional about negotiation, I encourage you to do something, which is to tap into this middle area where the two overlap, and that is what's called wise mind. It is the blend between the two worlds. So it's not good to just be a robot in our society or in a negotiation, and it's not good to be a total mess in a negotiation. It's the blend between the two, and it's finding that balance. And I am of the belief that women do this really well. So let me give you an example of what this might look like, so you can then start to apply it to your own situation. So in this case, I took a leader who is negotiating with somebody who is applying for a job. And this is actually based on a true story that someone recently told me. So this really happened. So she was negotiating. She was a manager. She was negotiating. She had a couple of final candidates, and she had one candidate sitting in front of her that she wanted to offer the job. So they got into the negotiation, and this woman in front of her, this soon-to-be employee, made absolutely every mistake in the book. She, talked too much. She didn't express her value. She really was negotiating against herself. And this leader was just sitting there watching this unfold. And so what her rational mind was telling her was, you know what, as a leader, I need to keep the pay for this employee and for my department down to a minimum, to keep our expenses down as a firm. So there's a part of her that wanted to kind of, win the negotiation, even though I don't believe there's a winner and loser, but win the negotiation. And then the emotional side of her was really feeling for this woman in front of her. As a leader, I always feel bad when women don't negotiate well. And what is really interesting when I talk to people who are hiring professionals, time and time again, that's not research-based, there is research out there, they say that women will often negotiate against themselves. So one of the tips I have for you is ask for what you're worth and then shut up, be quiet. In the virtual world, I actually, when I'm negotiating a contract, put a little sticky note up on my computer, be quiet, because as you can tell, I'm highly verbal. Okay, so she has these competing thoughts. Next, she says to herself, it's my job as a leader to role model skills to the people that are in my department and to women coming up. And then the emotional part said, and this is just honest truth. She said, you know what? No one role modeled for me when I was climbing up the ladder. So there's a little bit of frustration and anger, and there's a little bit of a compassion. And so she has all these competing thoughts. And so the rational decision would be, you know what, I'm going to just keep it to a minimum. This lady has talked herself out of, a higher salary. Emotionally, I don't know what you'd do with this. You might feel bad for the woman. You might feel angry at the woman. You might feel angry about your career, but it wasn't going to be useful just by itself. So here's what she decided to do, which I thought was really interesting. Her wise mind decision, the blend between the rational and the emotional, was that as a leader, she felt like she needed to watch her budget, but she also needed to role model for the next generation and her staff. And she said, you know what I did? I gave this woman the higher end of the salary range that she was considering, maybe not the top, but not the lowest, where she would put her based on just her negotiation skills, not her qualifications. She said, but what I did is I did that. And then we had a discussion right then and there as to what I saw as a way for her to improve her negotiation. So she was able to honor the rational, and she was able to also honor the emotional. Now, it may be different when it's your own negotiation, but what you can do to use this tool, very simple, on a piece of paper. I'm a big paper girl, although I'm a big recycler. It's very confusing at this point in my life, but you draw two circles, right? So you draw these two circles overlapping. You write down everything that your rational mind has to say. Then you write everything that your emotional mind has to say, and you look at it right in front of you about that negotiation. And then you figure out what's the blend between the two. Use your emotions to help you. Use your rational thought to help you. Use both. It's our superpower. So that's the wise mind technique. And yes, someone just put in the chat that it was kind of rare what this woman did in terms of coaching the person on the spot. And it was rare, but I think if we can do more of that, depending on the situation, that can be really useful. So today we have talked about the art of negotiation with help to start to tap into your negotiation mindset and thinking about reframing those thoughts. Taught you the wise mind technique. It's a simple technique. Again, if you have questions, we can talk about it during this last couple of minutes, or we can certainly talk about it, one-on-one. You can just ping me. But basically what I want you to do is I want you to take action. We all attend so much of this information, and I'm an action girl. If you read my bio, it looks like I love to just sit around and do theories and research. That is not me at all. I am all about the practical and tactical. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to commit to one action step you're going to take. You can keep it small and doable. Don't be like, I'm going to become a better negotiator tomorrow. Say something like, you know what, I'm going to sit down and really think about my negotiation mindset. Or I'm going to pick one small thought that I think is sabotaging and continue to work at what is the evidence? How do I reframe it? So those small doable steps is how we change behavior, not one big grandiose plan. And coaching has proved, and behavioral change studies prove that if you write it down, you're more likely to do it. And if you share your plan, which feel free to share it in the chat, feel free to share it with a mentor, somebody else, and make sure that you share that plan with somebody so you can be accountable and really commit to that change.